Thou Art the Man by Mary Elizabeth Braddon. Chapter 5. From the Far Off Land. Sybil's own particular retreat was in a tower at the southern angle of Ellerslie House, and it was one of the prettiest rooms in a house where beauty and harmony of furniture and decoration had been achieved regardless of cost, and with the aid of all the new lights which high art has cast upon our domestic surroundings. The room was octagonal, and the 8 panels accommodated frescoes of the 4 seasons, alternated with 4 allegorical figures representing dawn, noon, evening, and night, these executed in a decidedly French manner at which sturdy English art might lift the nose and shrug the shoulder of contempt, but for which decorative purposes was admirable. Madras curtains of pale amber, chairs and sofa covered with sea green silk, piano, tables, bookshelves, and mantelpiece, all in white enamelled wood, gave delicate brightness to the room, which was lighted by 4 tall casement windows overlooking sea and moor, and the village of Ardliston straggling along the edge of the cliff, with its snug little harbour sunk deep into the hollow of the hills. Sybil could see all the outer world for which she cared from these 4 windows. She had spent an occasional summer at Scarborough, and she had seen the glory of the English lakes, but the world she loved was the world of far-reaching moorland and far-reaching ocean. At 2:30 on that summer afternoon, Marie Arnold stood in the golden light, while her wondering eyes slowly made the circuit of the room, and then concentrated their gaze upon the owner of these luxurious surroundings, who stood smiling at her, a gracious figure, a pale, sweet face, a tall slip of a girl, slenderly formed, and with only the promise of beauty, a figure and face which were both curiously contrastive with the strongly built and well-rounded form, brilliant black eyes, and vivid colouring of the young woman from the sunny south. Sybil asked her if she could speak English. She replied modestly, "Very little." But her father was an Englishman all the same, she informed Sybil, and she hoped to learn English very quickly. "Ah, mais no," cried Sybil. "Learn very slowly. Do not learn at all." She went on in her pretty girlish English French. "I am going to talk French with you always. I shall get along so much faster with you than with Fraulein, because you will never correct me. You will not, will you, Marie? You won't take the faintest notice of my faults in grammar, and you will only stop me when I am so bad that you can't tell what I mean. Is that a bargain?" "But mademoiselle speaks like an angel," protested Marie with her pretty southern flattery. No, I am wretched as to grammar. Fraulein stops me every minute, first a wrong tense, then a wrong gender, and then the form of the sentence is all wrong, and then I have to say devant when it should have been avant, or sauf when I should have said except. As if it mattered. That is not the way to teach a girl to speak a foreign language. The way is to let her talk and talk and talk as the birds sing, until her instinct teaches her what is right and what is wrong. Come and sit on my sofa, Marie. Isn't it a darling sofa? And tell me all about yourself and the country where you were born. Marie sighed and obeyed, and presently they were sitting on the sofa, the fair head close beside the dark shining hair that had grown in the sun, and which always had sunny gleams even in its darkness. The large dark eyes had golden lights in them, as if they too had taken beauty from the southern sun. Tell me all, urged Sybil, always in French, delighted to be able to talk without apprehension of the Fraulein's nice criticism. Unless it grieves you to talk of your home? No, mademoiselle, it does not grieve me. I have wept all my tears. I have wept my fears since my mother died, just a fortnight ago. Only a fortnight? And my mother died only a year ago. Ah, I can feel for you. And the white, slim hand stole into the French girl's coarser hand, and tears rained from Sybil's violet eyes. The very name, mother, was a charm to make her weep. She was not always kind, mademoiselle, but I was sorry all the same when she died. She was only ill for a few days, and she was unconscious toward the last, so that we could never say goodbye. She drifted out of life in a long sleep, and I was left alone there in our little villa at Mourgin, alone with the poor dead mother, not knowing what was to become of me any more than the great white cat she had been fond of knew what was going to become of him. Had you no uncles and aunts and people? Inquired Sybil wonderingly. She was so richly provided with relatives upon the Allendale side of her house, to say nothing of numerous humbler Higginsons, that she could not imagine an existence unsurrounded by kith and kin. No, mademoiselle, I have no one, and I never heard that my mother had any friend in this world except Sir Higginson. You mean my father, Sir Joseph? Yes, Sir Joseph Higginson. But how did your mother, so far away, happen to win my father's friendship? Inquired Sybil. Her husband was an engineer who worked under Sir Higginson when he was establishing great ironworks at Fontaine-le-Roi, near the Belgian frontier, explained Marie Arnold. That was many years ago, before I was born. My father was killed one night in the railway 6 months before I was born, and Sir Higginson was very good to my mother. She was not a peasant, mademoiselle, and yet she was not quite a lady. She had no dot when my father married her, and she never learned to work for her bread. When she was left a widow with an infant, she was quite helpless. She would have starved, perhaps, if your father had not taken pity upon her. Your husband was killed while he was in my service, he told her, and I shall provide for you the rest of your days. And he kept his word nobly. My mother went back to her own country before I was born, and we lived in our little white house at Moulins, looking over the hills and the pine woods and the sea. Where is Moulins? It is a little town on a hill near Caen. Mademoiselle knows Caen, perhaps? No, but I have heard my aunts and cousins talk of it. Some of them go there every winter. And so you were reared near Caen, on the shores of the Mediterranean. I suppose you think that the sea over there is very ugly in comparison, said Sybil, pointing to the ocean she loved. It is grayer than our sea, mademoiselle, and it always looks like our sea in bad weather. And what do you think of our hills and moors? Asked Sybil with a somewhat peremptory air. Very ugly, mademoiselle. I miss the rolling olive woods, the cypresses, the valleys where the roses grow. I miss the perfumed air, the sunshine most of all. Don't you call that sunshine? Asked Sybil, pointing to the southward windows. Very fair for a sunny day in February, mademoiselle, not for June. Ah, in June, no doubt, your Moulins would be simply intolerable, like a sandy desert in Africa. No, mademoiselle, there is always a cool breeze across the hills, a breath from the unseen snow mountains, and there is always a shade in the pine woods, always freshness from the sea. It is only foreigners who fancy they cannot live in our country in the summer. Did my father ever come to see you at Moulins? Yes, mademoiselle, years and years ago, before I went to the convent. What convent? You're not a nun, are you? Marie laughed for the first time in Sybil's hearing. No, mademoiselle, but I was educated at a convent at Grasse. Is that far from Moulins? Only a few miles. You can see one place from the other across the valley. I used to look from the convent windows, and I could almost distinguish the green shutters and the red roof of my mother's house and the pink blossom of the almond trees in the garden. And so you were educated at a convent. How odd. I am a Roman Catholic, mademoiselle, and most Roman Catholic children are educated in convents. Well, you are to be in the schoolroom, my father says. I am to make myself useful in some way, mademoiselle, Sir Joseph said when I saw him in London. Did you see him quite lately? Sybil asked eagerly. Yes, mademoiselle. He sent a person, his private secretary, I believe, to take me to England directly after my mother's funeral. Ah, yes, old Mr. Orlebar. I know him very well. He lives here when father is at home. A funny old man, isn't he? He was very kind to me, mademoiselle, all through the long journey, and then he took me to a beautiful house, like a palace, almost, in London, where I saw Sir Joseph. And he was very kind, and he told me he would always be my friend, as long as I conducted myself properly. And he wrote a letter to his housekeeper. And then I stayed one night in that splendid house and saw the picture gallery and all the beautiful things in the great salon. And early next morning, Mr. Orlebar took me to the station, he put me on the train, and told me what I was to do when I came to the end of my railway journey. And that is all my history, Mademoiselle. Poor Marie, sighed Sybil ever so compassionately. I'm so sorry for you. And if your mother was not always kind to you, still she must have loved you, her only child, and you must have loved her. Sybil had been wondering at Marie's dry eyes, since she herself could hardly speak of her dead mother without a rush of tears. Marie hung her head and paused before she replied. I loved some of the nuns better than I loved my mother, she faltered. Mother Anastasie, for instance. She was so good to me. It almost broke my heart to leave the convent because of parting with her. I used to walk over to the grass, to the convent chapel every Saint's Day, but it was to see Mother Anastasie that I went so far. I could have heard Mass in our church at Moulins. She was always pale and delicate, and they said there was something wrong with her heart. But she taught me more and worked harder than any of the nuns. She taught music and drawing. All the children loved her, and I do not think one of them loved her better than I. And just a year ago on Corpus Christi, I went to the convent and missed her in her place at the organ. And after the service, one of the lay sisters came to me with her eyes streaming and took me by the hand and held me to the burial ground where there was a newly made grave heaped with roses. She could scarcely speak for sobbing, but at last she told me how Mother Anastasie had been found only 2 days before sitting at the chapel organ in the afternoon sunshine, her hands still upon the keys, but her head fallen back against the edge of the high oak chair. She had died like that, Mademoiselle, alone, no one near her. They had heard the sound of the organ cease after she had played one of Mozart's finest glorias. As they walked in the garden in their recreation hour, and they thought that the Mother Anastasie was staying in the chapel for prayer and meditation. They watched the chapel door, hoping she would come out in time to take a little walk with them. But the bell rang for the class, and they left the garden. It was an hour later before anyone took the alarm and went to work and look for her. Marie's eyes were no longer tearless, and her last words were made almost inaudible by her emotion. You must have loved her very dearly, said Sybil, full of sympathy. Yes, mademoiselle, she was my spiritual mother, the mother of my mind and my soul. If I were to live to be ever so old, I think I could never commit a sin without her image rising up before me to stop me from wickedness. My own mother was fond of me in her way, but she was, so different from Mother Anastasie. She loved gossiping, cards, and pleasures of all kinds. She did not care for books or flowers or pictures. She went to high mass every Sunday morning, but that was all. She sat about on the walls or in the olive woods with her neighbors all the rest of the week, except when she could get anyone to drive her to Caen to see the fine shops and fine people. She was not often unkind to you? Questioned Sybil. No, she was not often unkind, and she never beat me. Sybil shuddered at the idea of a mother beating her child, she whose only image of motherhood was an image of supreme gentleness. But her pleasures were not my pleasures, pursued the French girl. There was no link between us, and the 2 years that I spent at Mougins after I left the convent were the dullest years of my life. I missed my old companions, and the music and games, and the studies even, though I used once to think them a burden, and my soul sickened at the gossip and the cards and the quarrels about nothing. A cracked oil jar, a handful of vegetables, loud talking from one door to other, quarrels that seemed to begin and go on for the sake of quarreling. Poor Marie! There are no quarrels here. Fraulein is rather worrying, but Miss Minchin is as good as gold, in spite of her fidgety little ways. I call her Mousie, because she is brownish-gray and quick and quiet like a mouse. But she doesn't mind, and you must not call her Mousie, not just at first. No, mademoiselle, that is understood, replied Marie discreetly. This was the beginning of a lasting friendship, which grew with the passage of time. Marie was accepted in the schoolroom as a useful companion alike by governesses and pupil. She had been taught to use her needle with exquisite art, and the Fraulein was not above getting her handkerchiefs marked by those skilful fingers, in return for which service she helped Marie to acquire a little German without taking the trouble to give her formal lessons. Marie was quick and learnt any new thing with wondrous ease. She had a fine ear for music, and she delighted in Sybil's piano. As a companion in Sybil's walks, she was incomparable, for she knew not weariness, and her light, springy step carried her over the moorland as easily as if she had been some wild creature reared upon those breezy downs. She was Sybil's friend and playfellow for 5 years, with Sir Joseph Higginson's approval, and it was only now, when Sybil had attained her 18th birthday, and all of the Mountford aunts were beginning to pester Sir Joseph about her appearance in society, that he began to wonder how he was to dispose of the humble companion when the heiress came to take her proper position in the great world. It is all very well to keep Sybil back for a year or so, said the only unmarried aunt, Lady Selina Mountford, who took upon herself to advise all her married sisters, their husbands, and belongings, and used to lie awake at night in her pretty little house in Mayfair, worrying herself about the family troubles. It is all very well for you to keep her buried alive at Ellerslie for another year. As your heiress, she will have a choice of eligible parties whenever she might appear, but she ought to come out before she is 20. She looks rather thin and delicate at present. I think another year may improve her," said Lady Selina, as if she were talking of a turkey that was being fattened for Christmas, or a young horse that was furnishing. Sir Joseph promised to bring out his daughter before she was 20, and thus, upon one subject at least, freed Lady Selina's nights from care. "There is always something to keep me awake," sighed the spinster. "Braemar's boys are too terrible. How is he ever to pay their Oxford debts passes my comprehension. And now I am told they play baccarat at some dreadful club in London, where young men who have no money lose £20,000 at a sitting, and Felix threatened his father that he would marry a girl he met at the Stefanotti's, another dreadful club where they dance." There was another year of respite for Sir Joseph, during which he might be able to find a comfortable settlement in the matrimonial line for the humble companion, so that she might not too keenly feel the difference in her position and that of Sibyl as sovereign mistress of the house in Arlington Street, and with all the town eager to pay her homage. "I don't want her to feel the difference," mused Sir Joseph with a profound sigh as he paced the terrace in front of his Tudor mansion. "It wouldn't be fair that she should. It wouldn't be fair." He sighed again deeply, for as yet no eligible pretendant to the hand of Mary Arnold had appeared in that remote northern region, and he began to fear that none might be found in the district. The girl was a papist, objection number 1, but an objection which had been disregarded by a needy evangelical curate, who, on ascertaining that Sir Joseph meant to give his dependent a handsome dowry, amount not specified, had urged his desire to make her his wife, and possibly to snatch a brand from the burning by winning her over to the evangelical church. The alliance would have been respectable, as the young Levite, though needy, was of a good Northumberland family, and of unimpeachable morals, but Marie did not like the curate, and would not hear of marrying him. "I shall never marry," she told Sir Joseph. "I want to be Sibyl's slave and companion always." "My dear girl, that is all very well while Sibyl is here," replied Sir Joseph, "but when she goes to London and is swallowed up in the gaieties of the London season, with hardly an hour of leisure for home life, you can't be her companion then. Let me be her maid then, and wait upon her, and sit up for her at night, and help her undress, and hear all about her pleasures and gaieties." "No, Marie, not a servant. You must never be her servant. You must never think of yourself as a servant. I want to see you happily married before Sibyl marries. You are 6 years older than Sibyl, 24. You must have been in love half a dozen times, I should think." "Never," said Marie with an emphatic shrug. "I have even tried to fall in love with the curate. Not this one, but the tall, good-looking young man who was here before him, and whose sympathies were all with my church. With that young Dr. Dusnap, son and assistant. But there is no such thing as love in my nature, I think. I adore Sibyl, and I love you, and that is all the love I am capable of feeling." "Ah, we shall see, Marie. Trees that are long and flowering bear very fine blossoms. The aloe, for instance, and the magnolia, said Sir Joseph, patting her shoulder as he trudged along by her side. A sturdy, active man, although his 70th birthday had been kept by the pitmen with beef and beer and noisy rural sports and dancing and fireworks nearly a year before. He was very fond of Marie Arnold. He liked to have her to sit with him and his daughter of an evening. He liked to hear her sing her pretty French chanson, full of coquetry and dainty love, blue skies and sunlit valleys, fountains, orange trees, eglantine and honeysuckle, bees and butterflies, songs that touched none of life's serious phases, nor ever hinted at old age or death. In this springtide of Sir Joseph's 71st year, he happened to be at Ellerslie for a short time, with Marie as his only companion, and this companionship drew them nearer together than they had ever been before. Never until now had Sir Joseph been at Ellerslie without his young daughter to hang upon his footsteps and ride and drive with him and play billiards with him or sing and play to him of an evening. Marie had been a secondary figure while Sybil was present, but when April began, Sybil was at Hastings, whither she had been dispatched suddenly at Dr. Dewsnap's instigation to cure a cough which had hung upon her all the winter. There were great things being done in the pits, alterations and extensions which required Sir Joseph's supervision, so he had been unable to go with his daughter, who had been confined to the care of Miss Minchin, Fraulein Stahlherz, having gone back to her native Hanover, and for the first time in his widowhood he found himself pacing the long drawing-room at Ellerslie, or taking his morning constitutional on the terrace, without that graceful figure near at hand. She was to come home as soon as the cough was actually cured, by warrant of the Hastings doctor, and in the meantime she wrote to her father daily, telling him of all her walks and rides, her excursions to the battle or to Pevensey, her readings of the Norman Conquest in Thierry, Green, and Freeman, and her longing to return to her father and Ellerslie. His life in that great house would have been very dreary, for he had no visitors at this time, and his secretary, Mr. Orlebar, was not a very lively person. If he had not found Marie an attentive and vivacious companion, pleased to do all that Sybil was accustomed to do for him. Mrs. Morrison shrugged her shoulders when she saw the foreign waif filling the absent daughter's place. She liked Marie, but she disapproved of that young person's exaltation. "He told me not to give her any fine notions when she first came here," mused the housekeeper, "and now he is giving her fine notions himself. A young woman who spends all her evenings in the long drawing-room will never be contented to take a humble position in after life." It was not more than 3 or 4 days after Sybil left Ellerslie when a stranger appeared upon the scene, a gentleman who called upon Sir Joseph one afternoon and sent in his card, upon which appeared the name of Braddon, Mountford, Travellers' Club. Any Mountford was secure of a welcome from Sir Joseph, who was never tired of showing kindness to his wife's kindred, but the name of Braddon touched him with a curious thrill, which was closely akin to pain. Braddon was the name of the distant cousin to whom Lucy Mountford had given the innocent love of her young heart. That Braddon Mountford had died in India 2 years after Lady Lucy's death, but she had left a son, and in all probability this was the son. These thoughts went swiftly through Sir Joseph's brain as he looked at the card which had been brought to him in his study, the room in which he interviewed agents and tenants and transacted business of all kinds connected with his estate. "Mr. Mountford is in the drawing-room, I suppose," he said. "I'll go to him." He found the stranger standing in front of a wide window, looking landwards over the valley and the river winding through it. A man of about 28, Sir Joseph thought, tall, well set up, and with a fine, frank countenance, well-cut features, the Mountford nose which inclined to the aquiline, bright blue eyes, light brown hair curling close to the well-shaped head, and a complexion tanned by a hotter sun than ever shone upon Cumbrian cliffs. "I am very glad to see you at Ellerslie, Mr. Mountford," said the old man cordially, holding out a broad hand in friendly welcome. "Come to have a look at our north country, I suppose. You must come and put up here for a week or two, and let me show you a coal pit, if you've never seen one." "You are too good, Sir Joseph, but I haven't come here with any intention of quartering myself upon you, though I have come to ask you a favour. Here's Bramar's letter to vouch for me as an insignificant but not disreputable member of the house of Mountford. I happened to hear from him of your splendid Salmon River, and was seized with a longing to cast a fly in the waters he praised so warmly." Braddon Mountford here produced an unsealed letter, over which Sir Joseph ran his eye carelessly. "You want to have a go at our salmon? Well, my dear fellow, fish away to your heart's content. There are plenty of scaly gentlemen, but they are deuced shy, and you may be up at 5 o'clock every morning for a week, and yet not early enough to catch them. Then, after a few blank days, perhaps you may get a run of luck. I used to enjoy the sport myself 30 years ago, when I was still young enough to wade breast high in the river in a Scotch mist from 7 in the morning to 7 at night, and relish my dinner and my whisky toddy all the better for the day's work. Where are you staying, Mr. Mountford?" "At the Higginson Arms at Ardliston." A cosy old inn and a capital landlady, but I think we can make you rather more comfortable at Ellerslie. You'd better go and fetch your portmanteau." "Indeed, Sir Joseph, I had no idea," protested Mountford. "You will be nearer the salmon," pursued his host, "and I can give you a keeper who knows every yard of the water. You'll find this house uncommonly quiet, for I am here on business and have invited no one since Christmas. My daughter is away, and I have only a sort of adopted niece who cuts my newspapers for me and reads me to sleep after dinner, a nice bright girl who sings charmingly." Sir Joseph grew suddenly thoughtful. What if this Braddon Mountford, who had dropped from the clouds, for the very man he wanted, an honest man, a husband for Marie Arnold. He liked the look of the young man, a gentleman to the tips of his fingers. Good blood showed itself in every line and of face and figure. Penniless, no doubt. The Mountforts were all poor. Property in Ireland for the most part. Family numerous. Chieftain, weighted down by innumerable portions and allowances to daughters and younger sons. Bramer tells me you have travelled in Africa, said Sir Joseph, glancing at the letter in his hand, and that you have won some renown already as a hunter of big game. My gun is my only road to fame, Sir Joseph. Yes, I have spent 5 years on the Dark Continent. You must have gone there very young. I sailed for the Cape soon after my 21st birthday, and within a year of my father's death. Africa has been my country from that time to this. I am only in England as a visitor. You mean to go back? Ah, yes, I mean to go home. A strange fancy for a young man with all the world before him. I know no grander world than the shores of Zambesi, no happier life than the freedom of the wilderness. You can tell me your adventures over a glass of mouton tonight. Go and get your portmanteau. You are too kind, Sir Joseph, but are you sure I shan't be in the way? If you have come to the north on business, you may find yourself bored by a visitor. I never put myself in the way of being bored, answered the old man bluntly. You may be sure I shouldn't ask you if I didn't want you here. Then I shall be delighted to come, said Mountford. I only regret that I shall not see my young cousin. Bramer was full of her praises. She's a good little girl, said Sir Joseph. I don't think my life would be worth 6 pence a day without her. And then his thoughts went back to the girl's mother, and to those far-away days when he sat by Lady Lucy's side in the Hertford Street drawing-room, and she told him of her little story of a misplaced love. Was this Braddon Mountfort the son of that Braddon Mountfort? He wondered, nervously anxious to be enlightened. Your father was in the army, I think, he said tentatively. Yes, in the engineers. He died in India, as brave a soldier as ever fought there. And your mother, is she no longer living? The young man's face flushed at the question, and a troubled look came into his eyes. My mother died many years ago, while I was at Wellington. She had been a great invalid ever since my birth, he answered with painful pauses in the final sentence. Sir Joseph felt that he had been cruel to push the question, but he had wanted to be sure of his facts, and now he was sure. This man was the son of that distant cousin to whom Lucy's young heart had gone out, and who doubtless had given her love for love. The man so unhappily mated, so faithful to that tragic bond. If I can do him a good turn, I will, thought Sir Joseph. He shan't go back to Africa if I can hinder it. He would make a capital husband for Marie. They would be a splendid couple. Braddon brought his portmanteau and fishing tackle to Ellerslie in the course of the afternoon, and dined alone with Sir Joseph in a snug tapestried parlour which the millionaire preferred to the great dining-room with its lofty carved oak buffet and decoration of gold plate. The two men sat a long time over their wine, though Braddon did but just small justice to Sir Joseph's famous mouton. He was a tremendous smoker, however, and consumed nearly a dozen cigarettes while Sir Joseph entertained him with reminiscences of his juvenile struggles and the hazards and successes of his manhood. It was late when they went to the long drawing-room, and Braddon, who had forgotten his host's mention of an adopted niece, was startled at seeing a young woman, neatly dressed in black silk, with a bunch of tea roses at her waistband, seated, reading, near a lamp-lit table. She had not dined with them, yet she had the air of being one of the family. Sir Joseph introduced Mr. Mountford to this young lady, who was called Miss Arnold, yet who spoke with a French accent, and whose dark eyes and warm olive complexion were decidedly un-English. "And now, Marie, you can sing us one of your little songs," said Sir Joseph, settling himself in a luxurious chair, with evident resignation to an impending slumber. He was asleep before Marie had finished her first song, and Braddon and the young lady were practically alone, a fact which seemed less embarrassing to her than to the man not long returned from Mashonaland, and from a society which bulk, beads, and blackness are the chief characteristics of female beauty. It was a new thing for Braddon to find himself in a solitude of two with a handsome young woman whose history, associations, and character were utterly unknown to him. She sang the inevitable "Si tu savais" with a good deal of feeling, and in a rich contralto voice, and then "De Morse Ninon," and then a little Provençal ballade, and then another at Braddon's urgent request. When he could not with decency ask her to sing any more, he entreated her to play something. Chopin, Thalberg, Strauss, Sebastian Bach, Porpora, Lully, anything she chose. He would have kept her at the piano all the evening if he could, rather than face the ordeal of conversation with a strange young person, but she rose and shook her head at the question of playing. "I am no pianist," she said. "I have never played anything but my own accompaniment. Mrs. Higginson plays magnificently. I should never dare to attempt the piano, for she is. I learned to play after I was grown up." "What kind of music does Mrs. Higginson prefer?" asked Braddon. "Oh, all the great masters. Beethoven, Mozart, Mendelssohn, Chopin. And she extemporizes exquisitely. The piano, to her, is a living creature, her most intimate friend. She and her piano talk to each other for hours together. I can only sit in a corner with my needlework and wonder at her. She is far away from me in another world." "Yes, my little girl has a genius for music," said Sir Joseph, awakened at once by the cessation of song. "And Marie has a fine voice and a pretty taste, hasn't she, Mountford?" Braddon said all that was proper and complimentary about Miss Arnold's singing, and felt infinitely relieved by the worthy baronet's return to consciousness and conversation. "I hope I may have the pleasure of hearing Miss Higginson play before I leave Ellerslie," he said presently. "Does she return soon?" "That depends on her doctor. She is not to leave Hastings without his permission." "Ah, you must miss her sadly." "I would be lost without her if it weren't for Marie. She takes care of me. She's like a second daughter to me. By the way, Marie, Mr. Urquhart is coming in a day or two. Don't forget to tell Morrison to have his room ready." Marie's cheek and brow crimsoned, and the dark, strongly arched brows contracted in a frown. "What brings Mr. Urquhart here again so soon?" "The same attraction that brings Mr. Mountford. My salmon river." "He will be company for you, Mountford," added Sir Joseph to his guest. "Urquhart's brother, Lord Penrith, is a neighbour of mine. Urquhart lost his wife only a year ago, married badly, a poor parson's daughter, and he contrives to spend a good deal of his life at Callander Castle. It suits him uncommonly well, you understand, for he has my shooting and fishing as well as his brother's." Braddon watched Marie Arnold's face while Sir Joseph was talking, and wondered at the angry and troubled look which clouded a countenance that had been gay and smiling a few minutes before. There must be some strong reason for her dislike of Mr. Urquhart, he told himself, and he became more interested in the girl's character and history from this moment. End of chapter 5.